Hello and welcome back to Storytime with Eric Zimmer. First we covered Albert Herter, then we covered Ferdinand Horvath. Now comes the third concept artist of the 1930s, Gustaf Tenggren. Are you ready? Alright, let's begin. They invited Gustaf Tenggren to come in and make key sketches for Pinocchio, which he did. And we loved those sketches. He was a European, and those were things he knew as a boy. He knew those places. Layout artist Ken Anderson. Like Albert Herter and Ferdinand Horvath, Gustaf Tenggren came from Europe, hence his foreign-sounding first name. Like Horvath, and to a much lesser extent Herter, he had worked on book illustrations before joining Disney. But while the styles of Herter and Horvath were definitely cartoony, Tenggren was inspired by the formal beauty of some of the best Victorian-era children's illustrators, such as Arthur Rackham and John Bower. And, unlike Herter and Horvath, Tenggren was already quite famous when he joined Walt's studio on April 9th, 1936. The Arthur Rackham of Sweden. I was born on November 3rd, 1896 in Magrasaken, Sweden, in the home of my paternal grandparents, recalled Gustaf in the autobiography he wrote for the book More Junior Authors. My family lived in Gothenburg, Sweden, where I attended school with my brother and 4 sisters. Summers were happily spent in the country, tagging along with my grandfather, who was a woodcarver and painter, and also a fine companion for a small boy. I can relate to that. I never tired of watching him carve or mix the colors he used when commissioned to decorate, with typical primitive designs, churches and public buildings in the community. Aware of my keen interest in drawing, a kind and understanding teacher, Anton Kellner, provided stuffed animals and other interesting subjects from which to draw and paint. When I was 13, I passed a scholarship test in art and enrolled in evening classes. The following year, I received a 3-year scholarship and became a full-fledged art student attending day classes. This was the same school, the School for Arts and Crafts in Gothenburg, from which my father, also an artist, had graduated. During vacations and spare time, I painted portraits illustrated for periodicals, but the most exciting work was painting scenery and helping to design settings for the theater in Gothenburg. Again, a scholarship entitled me to 3 more years of study at the Valland School of Fine Arts. While still in school, I was commissioned to illustrate my first book, Bland Tomtar och Troll, which is translated to Among Elves and Trolls. I arrived in the United States in the early spring of 1920 and settled in Cleveland, Ohio. Those were busy days, drawing for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, painting 6 posters weekly for Keith's Palace Theater, fashion drawings for a department store, Taylor's, and at the same time working full-time for an art studio. After 2 years of this heavy schedule, I was ready for a challenge and decided to try my luck in New York City. For many years my studio was in this great city. Work was plentiful, and during this period I illustrated a number of children's books. Success and professional recognition did indeed meet Tenggren quite quickly after his move to the United States. A cover for Life magazine made in April 1921, only 6 months after his arrival, shows that Gustaf's self-promoting campaign was successful, explained Lars Emanuelsson, Tenggren's biographer. Another sign of this is his first exhibition in the USA, a one-man show at Corner and Wood Company with over a dozen watercolors, some fairy tale illustrations for Bland Tomtar och Troll, and others depicting pirate scenes, often with an eye for the dramatic subject matter. In spite of some harsh criticism concerning the exotic choice of motives, the reviewers were impressed with the artist's handicraft and many of his fellow artists praised the neophyte illustrator's work and felt he would go far in this chosen field. While Tenggren's career was flourishing, however, his marriage with Anna Peterson, contracted in 1918, was floundering. Gustaf's passion for alcohol and young women was to blame. His meeting in 1922 with the 19-year-old Malin, or Molly Froberg, was the last straw. Anne filed for divorce, and Gustaf married Molly on September 21st, 1927. By 1923, Tenggren had moved from Cleveland to New York, and by 1936, he had established a thriving career as a magazine and children's books illustrator, working for the most prestigious magazines of the time, including Ladies' Home Journal, the Saturday Evening Post, Good Housekeeping, and Cosmopolitan, and illustrating dozens of children's books, including several novels of Jules Verne, Andersen's Fairy Tales, Heidi, and the Red Fairy Book. Moving to the Wild West. In the meantime, on the West Coast, by 1936, Walt Disney faced his biggest challenge ever, the production of his first full-length animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. To tackle this daunting task, he needed to build up his staff. Quickly. At some point that spring, Tenggren received an attractive job offer from Disney, which he accepted. He and Molly moved swiftly, and by April 8th they were in Los Angeles, with Gustaf starting work at the Disney studio the next day. His trip out west had been eventful, as was recounted by artist Maurice Noble, who would later work with the Swede at Disney. Tenggren decided to move his car across the country from New York, where he and his wife had been living. Tenggren expected to see all the trappings of the Old West, including cowboys, covered wagons, and wild Indians, impressions he had apparently gotten from movies. But as he made his way further into the West, there was simply none to be found. Then he happened to drive into Las Vegas, which was a relatively small community at the time, well before any gambling casinos had been established. The townsfolk were having a Wild West day. Women were running around in hoop skirts and other types of pioneer dress. The men were riding horses and twirling lassos in full cowboy regalia, including chaps, clicking spurs, and cowboy hats. Delighted, Tenggren, in his thick Swedish accent, exclaimed, "Now we're really in the West." But much to his disappointment, when he and his wife drove out of town the following morning, headed towards Los Angeles, it had all disappeared. A few days later, Molly wrote to some friends. "Here we are in California. Gustaf received a wonderful offer from Walt Disney, the man who makes Mickey Mouse, the Three Little Pigs, etc., etc. He is producing the fairy tale Princess Snow White for RKO Productions. It is to be a full-length feature, 5 reels, full color. Gustaf is doing a great deal of artwork on it, and also on all the other productions in progress. They are scheduled to do 4 more full-length features, so Gustaf will be busy for a long time." Walt Disney has over 300 people employed at his studio. They all keep the same hours. They start work at 8 in the morning, have 1 hour for lunch, and leave at 5 o'clock. Gustaf has his own studio at Disney's and keeps those same hours. He is fascinated by the work and is all enthusiasm. "Until we send for our furniture, we are living at a hotel, Hotel Astor. It is located in the heart of Los Angeles. The days seem long as I get up at 6 o'clock every morning with Gustaf. We have breakfast together and I often go with him to work, just as far as the studio, and then back to the hotel. This is really a happy life, as this is the first time we have had a routine to live by." One of a kind. Gustaf's work on Snow White involved backgrounds, layout, and some color designs. The look and feel of the movie had already been established by Albert Herter, and production was in full swing when the Swedish artist joined the studio. But his talent was so obvious that his role soon expanded. By November 23, 1936, Director David Hand explained to Snow White's background and layout men that Tenggren is in another capacity. As I see him, he is more or less working on preliminary story, working with the different units for mood and keying of that particular sequence. He has nothing to do with preliminary work. He is to work with the layout men of that particular unit, to assist in building the sequence. I think Tenggren has a great deal of ability among certain lines, and we should use it. If we don't, we are wasting a man. Bob Kuwahara, at present, is what we call floater. So are Harold Miles and Tenggren. It is an important position. I find the units fighting for these three men. Tenggren was seen as so valuable, in fact, that he was quickly offered a 3-year contract by Walt with a salary of $200 a week. Quite a fortune in those days. Walt explained to Roy, "This salary is to become effective as of November 23rd, 1936. You may classify him as a layout artist and color artist, and also include in his classification that he will do any work of this nature on either the shorts or features, which we may choose to have him do. He will also do any book illustrations which we may request of him. We want to make his classification as broad as possible." The Tenggrens were clearly delighted with this setup. "Gustaf and I are living the best and happiest period of our marriage," wrote Molly in August of 1936. "This change seems heaven-sent. He took a week off at the studio and we spent the time at Santa Catalina Island. Don't we look proper on the image shots? Well, that's the way we are nowadays. We brought a Buick sedan recently, and over the weekends we take trips. Gustaf is sketching all the time. Sometimes we go to the beach and sometimes the mountains. We have a beautiful view of Hollywood and the mountains from our porch. We are high up and have an excellent view. There are so many motives right here that it keeps Gustaf busy painting." The invaluable man. At Disney, aside from his work on Snow White, Tenggren was also busy tackling many of Disney's best shorts, including Moth in the Flame, The Abandoned Silly Symphony Ballet des Fleurs, Little Hiawatha, and The Old Mill. For the last, he created dozens of stunningly beautiful little mood paintings that defined the overall style of the Silly Symphony. The director of The Old Mill, Disney veteran Wilfred Jackson, explained that styling was done for all of Walt's feature-length cartoons that I worked on, but not for most of my shorts. However, occasionally Walt felt it important to get a certain look to one of the short subjects, and an artist would style